Hey, Money Stop Mafia, how we doing? It's the older Coos, Cole Cusimano, riding solo today for this show. Steven, as you know, works for the Somerset Patriots, the New York Yankees AA affiliate, and he is in Tampa Bay covering spring training for the Yankees, so want to wish him a good time down there. He actually went to go check out our New York Rangers take on the Tampa Bay Lightning today, in which they lost, so that was a crushing blow. However, he did get to have some of the best wings, actually the best wings, in the U.S. at Hat Tricks. So shout out to Steven, shout out to Hat Tricks, and shout out to our New York Rangers. I will try and keep this as brief as possible because I'm sure the last thing you want is to hear me talking for 45 minutes plus. So with that said, why don't we bring in the pit stall, put the jack up, and start this pit stop for the money stop, the most important stop of the day, presented by Kicking the Tires. And starting with a light Phoenix recap, Christopher Bell finally gets redemption 5 months removed from blowing a brake rotor in the series finale in his second Championship 4 appearance to win at Phoenix Raceway, albeit not with a title to match. However, incredible race by that team and Toyotas in general. They accounted for 96% of the laps led in this race, and I know I'm in the vast minority here, but I actually enjoyed this race, as I do most all Phoenix races, because I just can appreciate all the hard work that goes into winning these races at Phoenix and being successful there, because it really takes a complete team-wide effort. You got to have a great race strategy, you got to execute on pit road, and the driver's got to obviously be perfect for all four corners at this really difficult track, which is not easy to do, as made evident by the comments all throughout the years about the passing here, which brings me to my next point. Passing. There's always talk of no passing at Phoenix, and I get it. It's not visually stimulating, but that's just incorrect. This race at Phoenix actually had the most green flag passes in the next-gen era, and it was the third most green flag passes since NASCAR started coming to Phoenix for the championship back in 2020. So, and I think you saw glimpses of this all throughout the race. I mean, there were passes for the stage win within the last 5 laps of each segment from Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell. And then most notably, obviously, Christopher Bell restarted this race from 20th with 91 to go and moved up 19 spots to get the win on a less magnified scale. And I think it hardly got any coverage to boot. Martin Truex Jr. was leading this race with 40 to go, had to rescind his lead to pit for fuel under green, and wound up finishing 7th. So I think the claim that there's no passing at Phoenix is completely false. And I think that people are so caught up in the fact that Phoenix is not Homestead that they'll just look for anything to complain about. And once people start to grasp that Phoenix will not race like Homestead, and not many other tracks on the circuit will, then the quicker you can appreciate all that goes into winning these races and being successful there, because it really does take a lot. It's a very demanding track, and I know the drivers complain a lot about like how hard it is to pass, but why would you want it to be easy to pass? I feel like in any pro sport, you don't want anything to come easy, and especially when it's the side of the championship, I mean, double down on that. So I'll end it there. I can go on for quite a while talking about why Phoenix is worthy of hosting a championship and why the racing there is not as bad as everyone says it is, but if you want to hear more and see more statistical facts about how competitive the racing is there compared to other short tracks, especially in the next-gen era, you can check out my column on kickingthetires.net. But finishing up things in Phoenix, Christopher Bell again walks away the winner and the Stage 2 winner as well. Chris Buescher came home runner-up, followed by Ty Gibbs, who scored his career-best finish in podium fashion at Phoenix. Then we got Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney rounding out the top 5, followed by Ross Chastain, Martin Truex Jr., a homegrown guy, Michael McDowell finishing 8th, Chase Briscoe, one of our big bunny bets to finish top 10, finished 9th, and then Tyler Reddick rounded out the top 10, so quite a few drivers mentioned on our episode. However, I will say, due to varying strategies on that final pit stop with 90-somewhat laps to go, a lot of the cars that were running top 10 throughout the day did not finish in the top 10, so I think this definitely kind of derailed our DFS lineup and some of our big money bets we had out there. But overall, I think it was a solidly forecasted day, and this was a race weekend where you could have taken a lot of stock into practice and qualifying because of the 50-minute session, and we saw that with Christopher Bell. He had the best long-run car by far in that practice session, and that obviously, paid off in a big way on Sunday. So when you have these practice sessions that are longer than the Group A, Group B, 10, 20-minute sessions each, that's when you can really dive into, making bigger bets on race winners and finisher props because there's more to back what is, going to transpire on Sundays. Moving on here, though, to Bristol. We are back to Bristol, baby, and on the concrete. No more dirt in 2024. And this will be a fun one. Starting lineup's going to be decided on Saturday at 5:50 p.m. Eastern Time. As it is every week, that will be a huge, huge factor in how you approach DFS, considering how crucial track position is at Bristol, and especially with this new short track package in the next-gen car. So, with that said, let's take a look at the odds per BetMGM pre-qualifying. The odds-on favorite is going to be our pole sitter last week, Denny Hamlin at plus 525, followed by Kyle Larson at plus 550. Then we got Christopher Bell, last week's winner, at plus 600. And then rounding out the top five at plus 900, we have Ryan Blaney and Tyler Reddick. So I think this is going to be a very interesting weekend for betting because we've only had 2 true Bristol races in this next-gen car, and I feel like there's not much you can take from Phoenix into this track, even though it is another short track, because it is a half a mile shorter. It races completely different, and you won't have that 15-minute practice session to really dial in on who's going to be competitive here. So for my approach, how I did this was I looked at the 2 next-gen starts at Bristol. I expanded that to 3 races and then kind of blended that with a little bit of, overall history from the drivers, as well as the eye test, obviously. There's certain drivers that have looked really, really good in 2024, albeit 4 races, 2 drafting tracks. So with that, let's kick off this favorites category with Denny Hamlin, who quite notably beat everyone's favorite driver last time at Bristol. Also has top 10s in his last 3 starts there with over 200 laps led and a 6.3 average over that span, which is the 3rd best. Expanded further upon that, his 1,036 laps led are 2nd most in the series, and his 13.9 average is tied at 3rd best in the series. So I think Denny is an interesting one because he doesn't really have the finishes to really showcase how strong that team has been in 2024, but you look at Phoenix, started from the pole, led the most laps, and was actually battling for the lead when he spun with whatever it was, 90-something laps to go. So I think that team and that driver are very hungry. I think that this is always a place where he always excels at, and you look at the most recent race here, that's a prime example of his status at Bristol and whatnot. So I like Denny Hamlin quite a bit this weekend, as well as the runner-up in that race last year in Kyle Larson, who might be flying a bit under the radar this week because he had a very lackluster showing and finish at Phoenix, but I think that would be very disrespectful to do to a former champ because he has some pretty great stats at Bristol in his career and in this next-gen car, riding a 3-race top 5 streak, including a win there. Expand that 1 race further, he is riding a 4-race top 6 streak with 291 laps led in that time. Again, only has the 1 win back in 2021, but 3 runner-ups at this track with a 2.7 average over his last 3 starts, and only one of 3 drivers with top 5s in both next-gen starts. Another one being last week's winner, Christopher Bell. Top 5s in both next-gen starts and 330 laps led between those 2 starts, and a best finish of 3rd coming in his last race there. Just, speaking on what Christopher Bell and this 20 team did in Phoenix, I think that's going to carry a boatload of confidence and momentum into Bristol, a place where they've shown they've had a lot of speed, have led a lot of laps, and have performed very, very well at. And then we'll round out our favorites category with William Byron, who finished 9th in the most recent race at Bristol, with 3rd place finishes in the 2 races prior, and a 5th place average in that span, which is the 2nd best in the series. However, very important to note, he has no laps led at all at Bristol in the Cup Series, and that is very important when taking into account how you craft your DFS lineups, because that is a major point of emphasis in the point totaling for the end of those contests. So I think, obviously, as we do every episode, I always include 4 drivers for each category, but for this show specifically, I think I like 3 from each, and William Byron's definitely my 4th favorite of the favorites. So with that said, I'm going to go through the values here. Already gave your race winner values for Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell, but William Byron is plus 1,100 for the race win, and he's our cheapest value in the favorites category for DFS at $10,700. From there, you have the third most expensive at Christopher Bell at $11,000, Kyle Larson $11,500, and Denny Hamlin $11,200. So really steep values. Going to be really difficult to get one of those drivers into your lineup without having a strong foundation or a solid base. And the only way to do that is to have some really good sleepers and value picks. So we'll move on now to our sleepers, beginning with Chris Buescher, who was the final driver aforementioned with top 5s in both next-gen starts at Bristol, and he almost has series best stats in that short 2-race span. Got 1 win and a 2.5 average brought on by his 4th place finish last time out at Bristol. Expanded further upon that, 3 top 10s in his last 4 starts there, so he's had success outside of the next-gen car at Bristol. I think that's really important to note with his values this week at $9,800 for DFS and plus $12,000 for the race win, and coming off runner-up at Phoenix. That's also, I think, should parlay some momentum into Chris Buescher's run here, even with Ford's slow start to the season. But do want to take into account here that he has a new front tire changer and jackman following his loose wheel penalty in Vegas. I do want to also touch on his teammate, Brad Keselowski, at $9,200 for DFS and plus $1,400 for the race win, coming off a top 5 day at Phoenix and finished 8th in the last Bristol race. Top 10s in 2 of his last 3 starts there with a win in 2020. A 9th place average in that 3-race span is 4th best in the series, and nearly 110 laps led in the 2022 race, where he finished 13th as the only outlier in that 4-race stretch. So do want to also mention that he has over 1,000 laps led here for third most in the series, and 3 wins total. So that is also one of the most in the series. A bit of a far cry, though, to Kyle Busch's 8. So Brad Keselowski, former champion, someone who always runs well at Bristol, I think will have an equally as good shot as his teammate Chris Buescher. But the one guy I'm looking at to have a really strong day is Chase Elliott at $8,300 for DFS, which is a borderline value pick number, and plus $1,400 for the race win, which is on par with Brad Keselowski. Best average finish in the series at 11.9 through 13 starts at Bristol. Top 7 in both next-gen starts there, including runner-up in 2022, which this one's important to note for me because he didn't have the best 2023 campaign, and for him to finish top 7 in that race last year, I think speaks volumes about how good Chase Elliott really is at Bristol, along with his series best average finish there. So still looking for his first top 10 in 2024, but the speed has definitely been there for that 9 team, and I think they're knocking on the door of obviously top 10s, but a win as well. And Bristol's always a great spot where that team can right the ship and get that quality outing, which I think will occur on Sunday in Thunder Valley. We will round out our sleepers category with Tyler Reddick, who is more of a gut call in my opinion, and just someone who's looked really good to the eye test this year. He's $9,000 for DFS and plus $1,200 for the race win. I just love what I've been seeing from this team this year. Back-to-back top 10s right now with a second-place finish in Vegas. Got the stage win and tied for most laps led in Phoenix as well. And just something I noticed at Phoenix and Vegas as well, this is looking like a much different Tyler Reddick I've seen from years past. Usually at the track, he's a very, bubbly, smiling, a very happy-go-lucky guy. But at Phoenix and Vegas, he seemed like he just more stern. Like he seems like he has something to prove, and I think that definitely brings out the best in drivers like Tyler Reddick and other drivers we've seen throughout the sport and making these kind of, mentality changes. But I think that'll bring good things on for this team. Not great stats at Bristol in next-gen era. Finished 15th in his most recent there, and no finish on the lead lap in both next-gen starts. In fact, only 2 lead lap finishes in 5 Cup starts at Bristol with a best finish of 4th. But I think just speaking on what I saw last week from Toyota at the short track in Phoenix, the supremacy from that stable should bode well for this team. And just what I've seen from Tyler Reddick in 2024, 2023, I think that will amount to a pretty solid day from Tyler Reddick in Bristol. Again, pretty solid value at $9,000 for DFS. Don't know if I'd really touch his race winner value at plus 1,200, but I do think he will definitely overcome the odds and have a really solid day in Bristol. Moving on to our value picks here. This is a very important segment right now because we've shown the last couple seasons how strong our value pick analysis has been. And for a place like Bristol where it's very top-heavy for DFS, you're going to want, again, a very, very strong and solid foundation, a good base. And that has to begin with Ty Gibbs, who is a legitimate contender for the win at Bristol with value numbers at $8,000. And yes, that is a value because when you start drafting these lineups, you begin with a $8,300 average remaining salary per player recommendation. So $300 below that and plus $1,200 for the race win, which I actually like quite a bit for race winner odds. Finished 5th the last time at Bristol with over 100 laps led, and that was his rookie season. Right now in 2024, he leads the series in average finish at 8.8 with 3 straight top 10s and back-to-back top 5s, coming off a career-best finish of 3rd at Phoenix. To put it simply, I love what I've seen from Ty Gibbs this year. I love him this weekend, and he is someone who I'm immediately plugging into my DFS lineups and someone who I'm sort of building around, at least starting off my lineups with, because that $8,000 for DFS is just too good to pass up on, especially with how good he's been in 2024 and just how good he is at Bristol in general. Someone else who I like quite a bit for Bristol is going to be Michael McDowell at $6,800 for DFS. Finished a career-best 6th his last time at Bristol and 11th in his other next-gen start here. His only 2 top 10s have come over his last 4 starts at Bristol, and I loved what I saw from this team in the night race last year. He was a top 3 car easily the entire night, and they had to settle for a 6th-place finish after some pit strategies and whatnot, but I love the resilience and the aggressive strategy calls in Phoenix for his top 10 finish. I think that just having that strong run they had last time at Bristol is going to parlay into a really, really strong day once again in this Bristol race. I know it's, definitely going to be a change in track conditions, speaking on the day and night, but I just think that you look what he's done at this track over his last 4 starts. His only 2 top 10s have come in that span. Michael McDowell should be a really, really strong contender for a quality day. I would say knocking on the door of a top 10. Like I said, he ran 3rd place almost the entire race last fall, but just given the unknowns of the 4 dark horses and whatnot, I think knocking on the door of a top 10 is reasonable expectations for that team. And then earlier in the show, I had mentioned that there was one Ford team that really asserted themselves as the best in Ryan Blaney, leading the point standings, obviously, but the other driver who has really turned heads in that stable has been Noah Gragson, and I think the speed in that team is very, very real. He has 2 top 10s so far in 2024 and coming off a 12th place day in Phoenix after running top 10 all day there. His average running position in that race was actually 10th place as well to kind of, solidify that. But just love what I've seen from this team. I think Drew Blickensturfer has really taken this number 10 team to the next level, and they're putting together some really, really strong days. Had he not gotten that 35-point penalty for the infraction on the roof stuff, he would be, I believe, 16th in the standings right now, I want to say. Either way, I think that this is all evidence of speed within that camp. And just speaking on his overall resume at Bristol, 2 wins in the Xfinity Series here, including his most recent race there in 2022, and just a great value for the driver that he's been this year at $6,700. Again, someone who I would almost call a lock. So you got the 2 rookie contenders last year, Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson, who I would consider almost locks. Ty Gibbs definitely. Noah Gragson, you could have your apprehensions, obviously, with the Fords and just this being a really difficult track. But I like what I see from Noah Gragson a lot. Rounding out this category now with AJ Allmendinger, very, I guess, under the radar and off the beat name for $6,100. Finished 7th in 2022 at Bristol, the first year with the next-gen car, and also won at Bristol in the Xfinity Series in 2021 in that crazy photo finish. So I just think that AJ is a very solid, sneaky bet. Already has 1 top 10 in his only Cup start this year with the next-gen car. I think you could go with someone like Todd Gilliland or Ryan Preece potentially in that same price range, But AJ Allmendinger seems like a more safer pick to me, with more starts in the Cup Series, more experience, has a top 10 already in the next-gen car here. So I think that's also, on top of, obviously, Ford having its issues so far in this season, AJ's driving a Chevrolet for Colleague. I think that should be a solid pick for DFS. And again, you can't pick all the flashy names because they usually don't work out for you. So AJ is one that I think is more of a gut call in my opinion, and one that could definitely pay off in a big way for you in the end. And one more fun fact, had their list in there obviously, AJ is running a Mountain Dew car at Bristol this week paired with Cheetos. So look for that hot rod to make some waves and look good while doing it. Seeing as it's only me today, I will give my personal favorite sleeper and value pick for this week. Kicking it off with Denny Hamlin. I think that team is due for a win. They won this race last year. He had a really strong day in Phoenix, and I would say a pretty disappointing finish, obviously, not getting a top 10 or even a top 5 after leading the most laps and battling for that win before spinning himself out. So I like Denny Hamlin for my favorite. For my sleeper, give me Chase Elliott as a legitimate sleeper. I think that team has looked really good this year. They've had the speed. They've not had the results. Looking for their first top 10, I think that will definitely come this Sunday and maybe even more out of that. For my value pick, I got to go with Ty Gibbs. I know that's probably a bit of a cop-out, seeing as he's plus 1,200 for the race win, but $8,000 is indeed a value for DFS, and I just love what I've seen from this kid. I think he's a legitimate contender for this win, and I cannot wait to see what he does at Thunder Valley. Moving on now to our big money bets. These are bets where you can place a larger sum of money on in hopes of a bigger payday for lesser odds than race winners. More sure things, in our opinion. For me, there are not many going into practice and qualifying, but the one I feel really strongly about is Ty Gibbs to finish top 5 at plus 150. This is coming from a guy who's riding a 3-race top 10 streak and back-to-back top 5s, and someone who finished 5th in this race last year. I love that one. Ty Gibbs, plus 150 to finish top 5. That's my only real, true big money bet. Another high-risk one I'm a fan of is Denny Hamlin to finish top 3 at plus 160. I think the top 3 ones are really, really tough to predict, and they're ones I only really go for when I feel really strongly one way about a certain driver winning the race. But for all intents and purposes, when we talk big money bets, I think we're mainly looking at top 5s and top 10 props, which I had not really seen any great top 10 finisher props, so my only one for this week is going to be Ty Gibbs finish top 5 at plus 150. Shifting gears now to our head-to-head parlayable matchups. We've got a decent set of these, actually. There's some different ones on DraftKings, different ones on BetMGM. I kind of combined both of them, but beginning with the DraftKings only ones, we have Byron versus Blaney, Reddick versus Busch, Larson versus Hamlin, Bell versus Hamlin. All matchups I'm not high on at all. Very much 50-50. And then you get into the BetMGM and DraftKings ones. You got Buescher versus Elliott, McDowell versus Preece, Bell versus Keselowski, Hocevar versus Berry, and LaJoie versus Austin Dillon. And for these ones, again, I don't really feel strongly about any besides Bell over Keselowski, and maybe McDowell over Preece, just speaking on how McDowell performed here in the most recent Bristol race. I think the Hocevar Berry one's interesting too, because Carson Hocevar, he has actually had very good speed this year, both in qualifying and in the races, and he's been a bit overshadowed, I would say, by Noah Gragson, but love what I've seen from that team. Josh Berry, he's a great short track racer, but he struggled at Bristol in the Xfinity Series and so far in his rookie campaign in 2024. So, I mean, I kind of like Hocevar a little bit better than Berry for that matchup, but not enough for me to pick him over him. So, with the two I like, McDowell over Preece and Bell over Keselowski, if you parlay those, they're both minus 160 in their respective matchups. That equates to plus 164 if you combine them for a parlay. And if you throw $20 on that, it pays $52.81, which I actually feel pretty solid about. I think that McDowell will finish ahead of Preece. I think Bell will finish ahead of Keselowski. And that's a really solid payday. It's sort of a big money bet, in my opinion. So outside of those two matchups, I would not really go much further personally. If you feel strongly one way or another over some of those matchups, by all means, go for it. But I'm only kind of putting my confidence in the two that I just mentioned in McDowell and Bell over Priest and Keselowski, respectively. Going to end things here now with our recommended DFS lineup. And as mentioned earlier in the show, I said it was going to be very difficult to include one of those top 4 favorite drivers into your lineup unless you had a really strong foundation to build around. And for my foundation, I went building around Ty Gibbs. Again, mentioned he was right below that average remaining salary recommendation per player when you start drafting these lineups at $8,000. So I like him a lot for this race. He was the guy I built around. From there, I kind of went up, and I went with Chase Elliott at $8,300, who was right at that recommendation for each salary per driver when you start drafting these things. Again, I think he's someone who's had a lot of speed in 2024. He's got the best average finish in the series at Bristol in the Cup Series through 13 starts, and he's someone looking for his first top 10 and who I think will get it here on Sunday. For our two value picks, I went with Michael McDowell at $6,800 and Noah Gragson at $6,700. Noah Gragson, again, I think he's been one of the best Ford drivers all season. Got the 2 Xfinity wins at Bristol, and I think that should amount to a really solid showing once again for that team. Michael McDowell, love what I saw from that team at Bristol last year in the fall race, and coming off a top 10 at Phoenix, I think that'll parlay into a really solid run for him as well. Our top 2 drivers, I've got Brad Keselowski at $9,200. I think that there's very much a lot of question marks still with that RFK stable, but they both scored top 5s in Buescher and Keselowski at Phoenix. I think that should spur some momentum and confidence for that stable going into this race. And to track where both those cars and that entire organization has done really well at over the years, but especially in the next-gen era. So I like Brad Keselowski quite a bit. And then in building my lineup this way, around Gibbs, with Elliott, who was not much more expensive than him, but a really, really solid driver. And then the 2 guys in McDowell and Gragson with a lot of stability, I would call it, in 2024. I was able to fit Christopher Bell at $11,000 as my ace in the hole, and who I think is a really, really good pick for this race. I think coming off the wins, obviously huge, had a really, really fast car, great performance, but again, in the next-gen era, he's led a combined 330 laps in the 2 starts here at Bristol. He's got 2 top 5s here, and I think he's someone who's always going to do well at these short tracks, but especially tracks like Bristol that race kind of like dirt. So I think this is a really solid lineup. Got some really strong drivers, 2 former champions in Chase Elliott and Brad Keselowski, guy who's been in the championship for the last 2 years, and Christopher Bell coming off his first win of the season. And then Ty Gibbs looking to have a really strong sophomore campaign. And then, I'm kind of rambling now here, but I think it's a really solid lineup. Going to put my money where my mouth is and lock that lineup in and lock in my one big money bet of Ty Gibbs to finish top 5 at plus 150. Time to close out the show with my race winner and sleeper picks. I'm going to go with, you know what? I went into this show saying Denny Hamlin, and I might look stupid for not picking him, just speaking on how well he ran at Phoenix. He won this race last year. But talking it out over this half an hour, I'm going to go with Ty Gibbs. I love what I've seen from this kid so far in 2024. I keep saying it. He's got the best average finish in the series so far this season. Lowest finish is 17th, riding 3 straight top 10s, back-to-back top 5s. Finished 5th in this race last year, over 100 laps led. I mean, the list goes on and on about why I feel strongly about Ty Gibbs this weekend, but I'm going to pick him as my race winner. And then for my sleeper, we're looking at 15th and lower in the odds for race winner, which would be Bubba Wallace and below. I'm going to go with Gibbs' Rookie of the Year running mate in Noah Gragson. So a lot of youth on my side here for this weekend that I'm rolling with, but I like what I've seen from Noah Gragson this year. I think that 10 team is looking really polished. Drew Blickensterfer has done wonders for that team and that organization so far this year. Very, very underrated crew chief in the garage area. And I think just speaking on his success as a crew chief and Noah's talent and resume at Bristol in the Xfinity Series, I think it'll amount to a really strong day and a fringe top 10 day once again for that 10 team. That'll do it for this show. Going to be dropping the jack now on the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. Want to close off here by saying thank you all so much for your support and for sitting through this half an hour of me rambling on. I know it's probably tough listening to one person talk things through, but I think the analysis portion was pretty solid, and we should be in store for another really strong day in Bristol, but can't thank those who've been following along and our new followers enough for joining in, because you've made this season so far through 4 races our most listened to season yet, doing double the numbers we did last year in 2023 for our 3rd season, and you made our Vegas episode our most listened to episode of all time in the 3 years been doing the show. So thank you so much for the continued support. We're going to keep getting better. We are compiling more data than we ever have before for this show. You'll start seeing some of that reflected in our notes in a few weeks once we get more races under our belt for DFS. But next week, Steven's going to return. It'll be business as usual, so you don't got to suffer through me another week solo. One more thing I want to preview before signing off. We only do cup analysis with the Money Stop. However, there is more money to be made in the developmental series ranks of the Truck Series and Xfinity Series. And with that said, I will be premiering a new show in the coming weeks called Cashing Out with Cole and Cody, my friend Cody Johnson. Big NASCAR fan, been invested in the sport longer than I have. Is going to be jumping on board, looking to get his name out there and provide some analysis for what he thinks of the lower series ranks. So be on lookout for that soon. We're going to start collaborating here shortly, but I also have to get my ass in gear in making these graphics to get social media going. Won't be traveling for a while, so I could definitely have more time dedicated to doing that, and I will have it out there within the next week or so. So with that said, thank you all again so much for tuning in. This has been the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, the Money Stop. I am Cole, Steven's in Tampa, and enjoy Bristol.